Sports movies, a staple of Hollywood before Hollywood even became Hollywood. Historians believe the first ever video taken from an actual video camera came in 1888, and just 10 years later, in 1889, Thomas Edison filmed a short documentary of a baseball game between the Newark Colts and the Reading Coal Heavers, and that became the first sports film of all time. Now, 126 years and, according to this list on IMDb, over 1,300 movies later, almost everybody has a favorite or is at least somewhat familiar with the massive genre of sports cinema. There are comedies, dramas, sports that are actually entirely made up for movies, pretty great movies, pretty bad movies, animal sports movies, sports management movies, and probably too many boxing movies, just to name a few of the subcategories. However, in a genre dominated by what are considered to be the classics, being rewatched over and over again year after year, stumbled across a little-known tennis movie that I absolutely loved. It's not on any best sports movies ever list that I can find, and it wouldn't exactly fit in with the likes of the more popular Challengers or King Richard, two tennis movies that have come out in recent years, but I think its greatness might stand up right there with them. That being the movie today's video is about, Borg vs. McEnroe. Borg vs. McEnroe premiered in 2017 at the Toronto International Film Festival alongside its European release, and in the spring of 2018 in the United States. The film was directed by Janice Metz, and despite an estimated $7.5 million budget, it only grossed $3.4 million at the box office, with only $230,000 of that money coming from the United States, even behind its star power with the likes of Severe Goranson, who I am so sorry, I'm almost positive that I butchered that, as well as Shia LaBeouf and Stellan Skarsgård. And despite relatively positive reviews from sites like IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, it's unlikely that it recouped much of this investment on streaming, as only 30,000 users have ever logged the film on Letterboxd. And taking all those figures into consideration, I feel like it's fair on my end to assume maybe you didn't know there was a movie about the best tennis rivalry and potentially match in history. But if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend checking it out before we get into the video. But that being said, let's get into the video. Firstly, I think something this movie gets incredibly right is their writing and treatment of our titular characters. So first we have Bjorn Borg. The cold and calculated Swedish world number one shows absolutely no emotion. He's had nothing but being the greatest tennis player of all time on his mind since he was a child, and where we pick up in the movie, he's on the verge of becoming just that by winning his 5th consecutive Wimbledon final, and he'd be the first player ever to do so. Then we have John McEnroe, and depending on who you ask, he's either the up-and-coming American rock star.
What we are seeing right now is unique. Tennis players are like rock stars. The tabloids are having a field day with him.
Or the up-and-coming American crybaby.
You cannot be serious! The ball's on the line! Chuck flew all over, man! Chuck flew.
We pick up with McEnroe as he's the world number 2 and hoping to dethrone Borg and win his first Wimbledon, becoming the new face of tennis.
And if I beat Borg in the final, it's very hard to boo me if I'm number 1, so...
On the surface, the two characters really couldn't be more different, and the movie even tells us this in McEnroe's character introduction.
That you and Borg are as different as two people could possibly be.
What I think this movie does so well, however, where a lot of other movies miss, is that through a series of flashbacks and as we get closer looks into their personal lives and relationships, we begin to understand they're not actually all that different. These big, larger-than-life personas get peeled away, and under the surface, they're both just people. Borg might get a little bit more character development, as this is a Swedish production, and this is a fair warning. Half the movie is in Swedish, but I wouldn't say this takes away from McEnroe at all, and at the end of the day, not only is it a cool character study of the lives of these two, it's also a very cool story about people and the nature of competition. I also think the approach to dialogue in this movie is very commendable. The dialogue in sports movies can often try to make them feel incredibly inspirational or epic, and sometimes that can work. Other times it really flops. The approach Borg vs. McEnroe instead takes is doing away with their larger-than-life personas from back in the 80s and allowing you to really empathize with both of them as people through grounded realism. And I never really felt like there was a true protagonist because of this. It's just getting to understand and even appreciate both of them as people and as competitors before they square off in the 1980 Wimbledon final, the titular match, Borg versus McEnroe. Before I get into that, though, I definitely want to talk a bit about the filmmaking. So just a quick little section here. Even if you're not a tennis fan or a sports fan, the filmmaking of this movie is very easy to appreciate. The score is so beautiful, and I don't know how to talk about it beyond that, but I really like the score, and the way it's shot is just awesome. The nature of tennis as a sport really helps out with that, because you have these big aerial shots that put you above the court, and you also have these shots where you're inside the match with them on the court. So it's very immersive that way, and it's edited in a way that those decisions aren't lost, but instead enhanced by the editing. So I think the filmmaking here is very easy to appreciate and pushes this movie beyond just being a cool story. So now I'm talking the final match, and I would definitely suggest, if you have not watched this movie, skipping past this part, go ahead and skip to here. But this final match is important enough, it takes up about a third of this movie's hour 45-ish runtime. This is big, but there's a very good reason for that. I mean, you really feel the weight and the stress of every single point and how it's almost endlessly going back and forth. I have never been more locked in on a sports movie as a member of the audience. So, evidently, McEnroe ends up being the first to give, and the more experienced and more focused Borg outlasts him. In the fourth set, there was an 18-16 final score, which I guess is absolutely diabolical. Didn't know anything about tennis, but yeah, you could tell. So Borg ends up taking his 5th Wimbledon. And it actually also yielded this incredibly famous victory photo to go along with it that I didn't realize I'd actually seen before until he did the thing. So the match itself closes both of the characters' arcs super nicely. Borg does the thing, falls to his knees. He's able to let go of all those emotions he's been bottling up ever since he was a kid in the name of greatness. And John is finally able to keep his own emotions in check and goes the distance with the greatest to ever do it. Borg gets his flowers and gives them right back to McEnroe in one of my favorite scenes in the movie. They accidentally run into each other in the airport, exchange some words that we hear, some that we don't, and according to the text crawl, begin a lifelong friendship. So McEnroe eventually gets the best of him, also in the text crawl, as McEnroe defeats Borg in the next year's Wimbledon and Borg retires. So they both get what they wanted, nothing but respect. I think it's just a very cool, true story, and fiction can't even make them up this well. So those are my thoughts on Borg versus McEnroe. I don't know why it's as under the radar as it is, but I think it's a great one, and if any of this sounds up your alley, definitely don't hesitate to give it a watch. I'd never heard of it when I turned it on, and I didn't hesitate to give it a watch, and I liked it enough to make a YouTube video about it. So I think you'll find it worth just under 2 hours of your time, and Middle Child Movies approves.
I'm just like anybody else. I'm not a machine.
Thank you so much if you stuck around this long. Any button clicking support is very much appreciated, because I'm just trying to get this thing off the ground, and hopefully I'll see you next time. Cheers.